Hello, everybody. This is Patty Finnegan. I'm here with Alyssa Westall from the OSPI Migrant and Bilingual Ed Department. We're going to talk about the changes, primarily the changes with Title III with the new federal law, ESSA. So just backing up from the federal law to our state, we have our OSPI Migrant and Bilingual Education mission statement here, and part of our excitement about ESSA is that there seems to be more alignment now between our mission statement and the federal law, and in particular that school environments that recognize language and cultural assets as valuable resources. That right there is highlighted in Title III and ESSA. So we just wanted to point that out, and we're pretty excited about this kind of alignment from the federal law. And staff members. So Mia Moore is our director, and we just want to put a plug that she is transitioning from the directorship in a few months, and her position will be posted, we anticipate, at the end of February. So be watching for that, and please pass that position posting on to anybody you feel would be appropriate for that job. And also, we like to show our smiling faces here because these are the folks that any new director would be working with if you're maybe pondering that position. So we have David Murphy, Alyssa Westall, myself, Jenny Choi, those are the program supervisors, and our support staff are Terry Beckman and Logan Andres. And we have the who do I contact with by topics there. Those are just sort of general topics. We do a lot of cross training in order to provide technical assistance to districts. So call any of us if you need help. And then, of course, call your program supervisor that does your grant first, because they're going to know your program more in depth. So in our presentation, we're going to talk about a few things here. So the purposes of Title III, a few changes there with ESSA. Standardized entrance and exit from the Title III entitlement program, so English Learner Services. English language proficiency assessment, a new reporting requirement specific to Title III. English learners with disabilities, Office of Civil Rights obligations that need to be met before Title III is used, required activities, use of funds, and then supplement, not supplant rules around Title III. And here's Alyssa to go through purposes.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for attending today. Before I talk about the purposes of Title III, wanted to kind of take it back a level. So along with basic education funds in Washington, districts receive state transitional bilingual instructional program funds to provide English language development services to English learners. And the per pupil allocation is approximately $1,000 per eligible student. Title III is the federal funding source to build our capacity to continuously improve and expand services to English learners. And this year, the per pupil allocation is $142. So Title III is there to assist English learners to attain English language proficiency and high levels of academic achievement to meet challenging state academic standards. But it is a supplement and capacity builder to our state program. In the next two items under purposes, you'll notice the explicit addition of principal and other school leaders. In ESSA, Title III calls out the importance of building the capacity of leadership. This is primarily through professional development, but can also be through leadership coaching, instructional coaching, site visits, what is working well in other districts, contracting with experts that come in and evaluate programs, additional time for collaboration. And teachers always appreciate it when their building leader is able to attend professional development with them. So then the principal can be there as a support for implementation. Another important note is the focus on the system under Title III. So Title III is used to build the capacity of all educators working with English learners, not just on ELL teachers or staff funded through the ELL program. And so Patty, with the focus on leadership, this would be a good spot for you to chat for a minute about the grad studies.
Sure. So we, just in the past calendar year, we did 2 graduation studies, one on English learners and one on migrant students. And our research question was, why do these 3 or 4 districts have high graduation rates for their ELs? And we did look at 4 districts with substantial numbers of ELs who had graduation rates that were a pattern of it too, that were above other districts and well above the state average for ELs. One of the things we did, besides just looking at the data, we went to the districts and interviewed the superintendents with anybody they wanted at the table to talk about their program for ELs. And then we looked at patterns across the 4 districts. So some interesting patterns came across. The first one was that to make this happen for their ELs to have this type of outcome, they needed to have executive sponsorship. So their superintendent and many times even the school board were involved in making a statement to all employees in the district that we're going to focus on EL graduation. And then from there they would elicit everyone's support. And they, several of these districts talked about the bus drivers, every employee in the district having some role in supporting ELs towards graduation. So that executive sponsorship was the key thing to making a difference for the high graduation rate. So the more principals and other school leaders could learn about ELs, what are their unique learning needs, what are the multitude of abilities and strengths that they bring to the district, and highlight those, the better the outcomes are for graduation. So we're excited about this change in Title III that could actually focus on professional learning with principals and other school leaders.
Thank you. And the final purpose of Title III is promoting parent, family, and community participation in language instruction educational programs. In the state plan, we are required to articulate standardized entrance and exit procedures for English learners. And these procedures must include valid and reliable objective criteria that are applied consistently across the state. So at a minimum, the standardized exit criteria would include a score of proficient on the state's annual English language proficiency assessment and not include performance on an academic content assessment. So this lays to rest that question that percolates every once in a while about whether a student who's met standard on the Smarter Balance assessment should still be in the ELL program. And the answer is the student exits based on a score of proficient on the state's annual English language proficiency assessment. So the good news for us in this area is that we already have the components in place. Our state procedures for identification are remaining the same. So the first bullet on the slide are our state procedures for identification. And we also have a state home language survey, so the questions that we use to identify English learners are standardized. We've just updated our home language survey, so Make sure you take a look at that. It's been reformatted so that the purpose of the home language survey is more clear to families. And we'll continue to use ALPA 21 as our annual assessment. The new component for us to be in compliance is that we've adopted an alternate assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities. So this is something that Patty will be chatting about in a few slides. So even though our procedures for identification have not changed, I would still encourage districts to make sure that you're reviewing them and looking at implementation in your district, because when we did compliance monitoring last year, over 80% of districts that we monitored were out of compliance for identification. So it's an area where guidance remains the same, but we need to implement the procedures more consistently across the state. ESSA reinforces the requirement that all English learners participate in the annual assessment, and the non-regulatory guidance indicates that local policies which allow parents to opt out of the annual assessment do not diminish the state and district responsibility to assess 100% of English learners. So with the window coming up, that's with either the English language proficiency assessment, ALPA 21, or with for the 1% of students who have significant cognitive disabilities, the WIDA alternate access. And in 2016, we came very close to meeting this requirement, with 98% of English learners in Washington taking ALPA 21. And you can click on the link on this slide to see how your district did. Or if you go to the state report card and you click on ALPA 21, you'll find the page that displays ALPA 21 results. And the page is primarily intended to show transition rates at the state, district, and school level. Transition rates can also be disaggregated by subgroup, by race, ethnicity, students served through migrants, students served through special education, etc. But if you look at, I know the font is tiny, but if you look at the under qualifies for program where it says no score with an asterisk, those are the English learners who did not participate in the annual assessment or did not return a complete test to us. And so that's something that you'll want to look at for your district by grade level and also for each of your schools. And Patty, the new reporting requirements.
Title III, the accountability portions have moved to Title I Part A. With ESSA, they are looking at a comprehensive accountability system, and that's why Title III accountability moved to Title IA. But with that, in ESSA, they have instituted reporting requirements. So, and as you look at these, they look a lot like some of the old AMAOs. Number and percent of ELs making progress in English, number and percent of ELs attaining English language proficiency and exiting EL services, number and percent of former ELs who meet content standards on the SBA. And the federal requirement is 4 years after exit, but we also have in our state 2 years after exit. So we would have both measures on the reporting piece here. And then number and percent of ELs who have not exited EL services after 5 years. So what our intent is to pre-populate as much of this these data as possible, and this would be the front end of your I-grant application. That's what we're envisioning right now, and be able to pre-populate there. And if we can't pre-populate, we would have a link where you could go get that data. That's what we're working on right now. So It would be, in essence, doing a program evaluation with these reporting requirements. So looking at your data and then just making decisions about your applications. How might you change your program model based on these data? What do these data say about what's happening? Maybe there's a professional development strand that needs to happen to improve the outcomes for your ELs. So that's what that's our intent anyway for the reporting requirements, to make it part of the I-Grant application. Please let us know your ideas. If you have some ideas in terms of how to make this easier for you to do, and also a natural part of your cycle of inquiry in your own program, tell us your ideas so we can try and incorporate that. And ELs with disabilities. So on this, we have a state law, it's WAC 392-160-045, that currently allows students with disabilities to be exited from ELD services, so our exit code G. And this does conflict with federal laws and denies qualified students their entitlement to ELD services. And just three of the laws that it does violate, so that would be IDEA, that's the special education laws. I don't have it listed on the screen, but it's also a violation of the civil rights laws, the federal ones, and Title III, so under ESSA as well as ESSA. So with all those conflicts, we had to address this. So a year ago, January, we put together an EL special education work group, and they're people, they're your colleagues actually in the field who have expertise in EL and or special education. So about 20 folks, 15 to 20 folks, have been meeting over the past year and continue to meet to first address this WAC and to suggest an amendment to put us in alignment with the federal laws. And the bigger piece that the group has been doing is some conference presentations talking about the changes coming forth, as well as they're developing an online professional learning module, actually 2 of them, to give just concrete examples as well as a list of resources for serving your students with disabilities in ELD services. So the group hopes to have a module done this spring, and then both modules will be done by summer. One module is going to look at students with more mild to like specific learning disability level services, and then one module will look at ELs with significant cognitive disabilities. So upcoming changes. So I mentioned the amendment to this WAC. We anticipate it being completed in March, so about 2 months from now. And that would be the effective date, so likely the end of March. And at that time, there will be a bulletin that will come from OSPI. It will be a joint bulletin from the Office of Special Education as well as Migrant and Bilingual, talking about the changes, why it came about, and what the expectations are for serving students with disabilities who also qualify for EL services. So more to come on that. On our webinar Friday, I talked a little more about this amendment, and some districts are starting to look at their Code G exited students and assess them with the placement test to see if they qualify and get them back into services. You don't have to do that until the WAC is effective, but some people wanted to get a head start on it. So you're welcome to do that, and if you have questions about that, please let me know. And I'd be happy to kind of map out what we see as the process. That memo, or I mean that bulletin that I mentioned, would be coming out in late March. We'll have all those details in terms of process. But anybody who wants to get a head start, you can do that. And another piece that the work group has done is made a recommendation for an alternate English language proficiency assessment for students with significant cognitive disabilities. That is the WIDA Alternate Access, and it is available this spring. And the test window is in March, so it's going to be a little later than the ELPA 21 annual test. Your district test coordinator should have all the details on that. If you don't have that, please connect with your district test coordinator and get that from them. The OSPI Assessment Operations Office has pushed out information to the test coordinators over the past couple weeks, so they do have those details. So one question that came in is, do students need WIDA in their IEP to be able to take that test? And that they do, because it's an alternate assessment, and IEP teams are the only group of people that have authority to make that determination for a student. So connect with the special ed teachers. So if you have a Code G exited list of students, you'd want to follow up with those special ed teachers that work with them. Let them know that there is this alternate assessment, and then they would need to do the proper procedures with the IEP to be able to get that input from the IEP team, so they can make a determination. And then if the IEP team says, yes, we want the student to take the alternate assessment, it does have to be written into the IEP, and there's a particular section for that. And another change coming up is domain exemptions. So Title III had in previous years not allowed this, and there's been a change in philosophy. So we're delighted that, for example, a student who is, who is visually impaired may not be able to access the 4 domains of ELPA 21, for example. So, and if I believe there is a Braille ELPA 21. I've heard conflicts on that, so I'm not the expert. Our assessment office would have all those details. But let's just say there wasn't a Braille, then that child could be exempted from, say, the, I didn't give a good example on that one. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think let's go with that. Let's go with the student who has hearing loss. So the listening section, because ELPA 21 does not have embedded sign language in the test at this point, they would not be able to take the listening section of the test, so they could be exempted from that domain. So, but throw me other scenarios and I'll keep learning, and we'll see what could possibly be a domain exemption. And again, this would be your IEP team considering this for the child. So that would need to be written into either their IEP as a domain exemption or their 504 plan. And kind of an exciting change is the professional learning opportunities, and that's the online learning modules I mentioned with that the work group is doing. But they're also presenting at a few conferences coming up. So the Spokane Regional ESL Conference, February 25th, they'll be doing a presentation there. TESOL, and that's March 25th in Seattle. And they put a proposal in for WABE, so hopefully there as well. And if we just take a moment, and we'll keep this pause and reflect short since you're not actually in Teams here, but I just want you to think about what system changes will your district need to make to fully include ELs with disabilities in the English language proficiency assessment as well as the instructional program. Okay, we'll move on now to civil rights obligations. And these are the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 as well as the Equal Opportunities Act. The first 5 bullets there, those are all requirements, OCR requirements that need to be done whether you have Title III or TBIP. If you have a public school, you need to do those 5, let's see, yes, the first 5 bullets there. And most of you have TBIP in addition to basic ed and local dollars that could be used to fulfill these obligations. So the identification of ELs with the proficiency assessment, and providing an English language development program with qualified staff, and meaningful access to content without unnecessary segregation. So not a separate strand of EL core content, but your ELs would actually be in the core content with their typical peers. And program evaluation, and that's program evaluation of your ELD program. And then language access for parents. So these are things that cannot be funded through Title III, and all of these obligations would need to be met before Title III funds would be used. Otherwise, there'd be a supplant issue. And some resources to fulfill these obligations. That's the Dear Colleague letter about ELs and their parents, and also the EL toolkit. And that's a great resource if you haven't had a chance to dive into it. That's a great one. And Alyssa's going to talk more about the required activities.
And I'm not going to let Patty move too far away from this slide. So under Title III, providing a language instruction educational program and providing professional development have been required activities. And the new piece for those 2 is it's not high quality anymore, it's effective. So Patty, what would that mean? Why effective?
So that's the reporting requirement. And in ESSA, they want to see actual student outcomes and data related to that to be the evidence of effective language instruction, effective professional development. So that bar is beyond the high quality where it's research-based, et cetera, with No Child Left Behind, but now it's outcomes and data to back effective.
And in the past, having a parent engagement plan under Title III was required, so you had to have effective outreach to families of English learners, but now it's a required activity, so you need to also use part of your Title III grant to support family engagement. So we see parent engagement, or family community engagement throughout ESSA, so I'm sure you've noticed that in several programs, and it's definitely a natural area for coordination. Under Title III, effective engagement that supports families and communities of English learners helps their kids learn English and succeed academically, and means that families have a voice in the English language development plan, program planning and evaluation. So they're helping shape the contents of your Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program grant and your Title III grant. Parent engagement under Title III is not just holding a separate Title III meeting so that you have that sign-in sheet to upload to us when we do consolidated program review. But you do need to implement efforts that are effective for this specific population. And it's about finding out from families what would best support them and what do the families in your district want and think is effective. So from the state level, we periodically meet with families, and some ideas that they've shared are welcoming environment, inclusive PTA, technology classes, parent leadership and advocacy, activities that celebrate holidays and programs to promote diversity of cultures, meaningful and reciprocal discussions, and they want to be able to speak with staff at all levels of the school system and not just with one particular parent liaison or interpreter. They want access to the principal, to the classroom teachers. They recommended, that they want to attend after-school and tutoring programs with their children so they're able to see what their children are learning and go to classes with their children to better understand the school system. And they also said thank you to districts for things that are already in place. The Natural Leaders program was something that came up in the grad studies that Patty mentioned earlier, and parents also told us that they appreciate. This year we conducted parent meetings as part of our Bilingual Education Advisory Committee, and we did that in Seattle and Yakima. And so these are the recommendations that came in last school year. So they expressed their value of bilingualism, and they're wanting increased access to dual language programs in schools. And again, talked about how important it is to celebrate and honor culture in schools. They want their children to be able to read and write in their language and in English, and they said they're doing their best at home, but they need the support at school. And parents want two-way communication, and they want communication in the language that they can understand. So anyways, they were very powerful meetings for us to hear directly from families, and so we're showing this as an example to you. So when you're looking at how you want to support parent engagement through Title III, the basis for that should really be, what are your families saying? What are they asking for? So when we met in person, folks talked in tables, and I'd encourage you to later follow up with staff in your district to talk about what effective engagement with families and communities of English learners would look like in your district. The information about Title III Consortia has changed very little. So districts still need to generate at least a $10,000 allocation to be able to apply for Title III independently, and that's about 70 eligible students. And if a district generates less than $10,000, they can form a consortium with other school districts that generates at least that $10,000. And so in the past, we've said you can do that and then provide services across the consortium, or contract with an outside entity to provide services across the consortium, and that's when the partner districts are wanting to implement common activities. And a new model came in Title III non-regulatory guidance, and that's when the fiscal agent distributes the portion of the consortium allocation to each district based on the number of English learners in the district. We were excited to see this piece, and I'm sure that if you're able to listen to the webinar from our fiscal department, you'll hear a little bit more about this. In the past, districts were able to take a 2% indirect, and that was the cap on any administrative costs. Now, with your Title III funds, you can take 2% for direct administrative costs, and then additionally take an indirect. And that will be reflected in grant applications. So as I shared before, the new subgrantee activities includes family engagement, which is now a requirement. And the next two bullets on this slide are the start of a very long list of allowable activities, which I'd encourage you to read directly from the law. And they're all under the umbrella of providing services to Title III eligible students and building your district capacity to better serve English learners. The third bullet on this slide is going to take everyone's good thinking. So early college, high school, or dual or concurrent enrollment programs or courses designed to help English learners achieve success in post-secondary education. So you'll note that the use of Title III for this must be supplemental, meaning that it's something new and not already available through other funding sources, and it's for English learners only. So think about what that might look like, and please send us your ideas. One new allowable activity that we've already identified and we will allow for this school year are the fees for English learners to take advanced placement tests, where there used to be funds available to cover the fees for advanced placement tests for students who couldn't pay for them themselves. Those funds are no longer available this year, so it would be supplemental to then use Title III funds to cover the test fees for Title III eligible students only. And that's based on the line there that refers to courses designed to help English learners achieve success in post-secondary education. Under Title III, supplement not supplant has not changed. So any guidance that comes out for Title I does not apply to Title III. Our non-regulatory guidance explicitly shared that supplement not supplant did not change for Title III under ESSA. However, we are taking the opportunity to update our guidance and identify areas for additional flexibility. So just because in the past something may not have been allowable, we're going back through that guidance and revisiting things. So definitely send your ideas there. So if we look at the bullets here, in one, it's presumed that supplanting has occurred if the state or district uses federal funds to provide services that the state or district was required to make under other laws. So that refer back to the slide that Patty shared about civil rights obligations. So because those activities are required under civil rights, they're not supplemental. So for example, translating vital documents for families is a required activity. It's not a supplemental activity that you could fund under Title III. ALPA 21 is a required state assessment, so it's not a supplemental Title III activity. So unless you are assessing students at private schools who that are participating in Title III, Title III cannot cover anything related to ALPA 21. It's already required. And the second bullet is that the state or district would be supplanting if they used federal funds to provide services that the state or district provided with non-federal funds in the prior year. And that, as we saw with the AP assessment fee, can be, you can overcome that if you can document the loss of the funds that you used to provide that service in the past. So think about your ideas for innovation that to improve outcomes for English learners and your opportunities to think outside the box under ESSA for Title III. And don't be afraid to ask us if you have ideas that you think we should be considering. Usually the guidance that we provide has started with a question that a school district has asked. So please prompt our thinking.
And we have an opportunity coming up for districts to share ideas and feedback with our Bilingual Education Advisory Committee, our BAC, as well as all of us in the Bilingual Ed office. We will be at ESD 112 in Vancouver, February 13th, 3:30 to 5:30.
Both of those. And if you did not receive it, please email Logan.
And some guidance documents and resources that we talked about during this webinar are the Title III non-regulatory guidance. It's very useful, so if you haven't seen that, please check that link out. It's not a large document, 20, 30 pages, and it's pretty helpful. Our bilingual education program guidelines, there's the link to that, and we will be steadily updating those guidelines to line up with ESSA. And then also please join our bilingual education distribution list if you're not on it already. Logan Andres can get you on that list. And we'll take questions and hopefully we'll be able to answer them here. We have one in, and it's we are now going to track SBA results for 4 years, not within 4 years, and that's a good clarification. So you would be tracking 1 year after exit and 2 years after exit, so you're already doing that for state law purposes, but you'll be tracking the third year and fourth year after exit to see how your exited ELs are doing on their Smarter Balanced tests, and if by chance they may need to requalify for program and services if they're not meeting standard.
And another good reason for doing that is for program evaluation purposes. How your students are doing when they exit is a good indicator of the effectiveness of the services that they were provided while they qualified for services. And it looks like that we've answered all of the other questions. So thank you very much for attending, and we are going to sign off and let Sylvia Reyna set up for the Migrant Education Program ESSA update that is immediately following this webinar. So thank you so much for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon. This is Sylvia Reyna with the Migrant Education Program here at OSPI, and just wanted to welcome those of you who are sticking around for the last portion of today's ESSA webinars, and this is regarding Title I Part C. We're going to be giving a little bit of an overview about the Migrant Education Program in Washington State, talk a little bit about our program purpose and our reporting requirements, how we're using the continuous improvement cycle model, what we're doing with measurable performance outcomes, our consolidated applications, the allowable activities, and health. As my colleagues in the Bilingual Education Program shared with you, this is our vision and mission statement for the Migrant and Bilingual Education Programs here at OSPI, and really wanting to do what we can to recognize the assets our students have within their language and culture as they directly contribute to their own personal success in college, career, and life. So really want to make sure we're not just looking at the data and the assessment results that may not always tell a clear picture about our students, but looking at where they're coming from, the things that they're overcoming, and the language and their culture that they bring with them. In Washington State, we have over 30,000 migrant students identified, ages 3 through 21. And the Office of Migrant Education has also recognized us as one of the largest migrant student serving states in the nation. And we have over a $51 billion agricultural industry. This is not even including our fishing industry, just the agriculture industry in Washington State, and why we really do have a huge need for agricultural, seasonal, and migratory workers, and the great skill they bring to us in harvesting our foods and making our foods around the world recognized. I love it when I see an apple out of in another state, and also just the wonderful skills that they bring to us, and the richness they bring to our state. So it is a truly important component to the economy of Washington State. I want to share with you a little bit about the way the state is broken up in, we have two types of programs. We have what we call non-project schools. These are schools that you see in the map are in red. These are where migrant students have been identified, but they are currently not receiving a sub-grant. And then we have project districts. Those are the ones noted in blue. And those are districts that are receiving a sub-grant, receiving funding, and providing direct services to migrant students with those funds. We run regular year programs, summer programs, and some other models for services. And we also work in conjunction with our educational service districts in Anacortes, Wenatchee, Pasco, and Yakima. So we really try to do what we can to get as wide as we can across the state, and trying to provide a comprehensive service to our migrant students. One of the things I wanted to highlight was that migrant students may not necessarily be immigrant students, and immigrant students may not necessarily be migrant students. They are defined very differently, although there may be some overlap. So if you notice, the first thing is that, again, we're talking about students aged 3 through 21. But in the definition of an immigrant student, these are students that are not born in the United States. And with migrant students, they may be born in the United States. With an immigrant student, you are fewer than 3 years in the K-12 school system in the United States. With a migrant student, it doesn't matter how long you've been in a K-12 system. And Title III also has its identification of an immigrant student. So immigrant sometimes gets mixed up with migrant, but they are two distinct definitions. In the migratory and fisher, agriculture and fisher definitions, we want to make sure that we are identifying those migrant students who have moved within the last 36 months, who are engaged in temporary or seasonal employment in the area of agriculture or fishing. And this may also include the initial processing process of raw agricultural products or also some dairy work. A new component that we're getting further guidance on is that last bullet, which is about how do we consider a migratory child who may have come to that area in search of the seasonal agriculture or fishing work, but not necessarily actually worked in that area. So there are some caveats to how we can look at those families to see if indeed they still do qualify or could qualify as migratory. So more to come on that last bullet. When we are identifying and recruiting migrant students in Washington State, we really do want to make sure we are looking at those families and those kids that have met those criteria as identified by the Office of Migrant Education. And so there is training tools and an office actually that does all of our training for Washington State. There's a Migrant Student Data, Recruitment, and Support Office in the Sunnyside. And they create all of the wonderful training materials, and they go out and we actually also host an annual conference where they come in to get that ongoing training. We look at redoing what we call re-interviews for quality control, and we also have every third year a third-party entity coming in from out of the state to do some randomly selected interviews, and just to make sure that when we qualify a family and we complete what we call the certificate of eligibility, those are kids that do actually meet that criteria. Those families did move. What you see in the top left-hand side of your screen is what they call a crop wheel, and it on one side notes the months around the calendar year where some activities could be happening, and on the other side, which I don't have a picture of right now, I apologize, but on the other side it actually tells you what are the activities that could be happening within that month, and then the crops on the other side. So it's really a great training tool, and if you were able to participate at the ESSA training in Tacoma last week, you actually would have gotten an opportunity to get one of these. But we do have them available through our Migrant Student Records Office if you are interested in getting a copy of it or an example. So in the trainings that we had last year, we had some opportunities for some pause and reflect. I'm going to use these little as if you have questions about student eligibility, what is a project, non-project, and some of the activities at Washington State. Okay, I'm going to move on to some other just some statistics about Washington State migrant students and where they are in relation to our state assessments. Currently, migrant students, 25% of our migrant students are meeting standard grades 3 through 8 in the English language arts, and 22% are meeting standard in math grades 3 through 8. These are resources from the report card at OSPI, so if you want to take a deeper look, you can go to the OSPI report card and it will show you some more detailed information about these results. For our 11th grade students, 17% are meeting standard in the ELA and 10% are meeting standard in math. And this is really critical when it comes to meeting the graduation requirements. And so this is where our program is hoping to lend support to helping migrant students be successful with meeting the requirements for graduation. Currently, for migrant students in kindergarten who are able to be reviewed through the WAKIDS characteristics, 18% demonstrate all 6 domains in the WAKIDS for 2016. This is a little bit of growth from the previous year, 2015, but again, we are seeing where a lot of times migrant kids are not not prepared for kindergarten when they enter. Also, statistically, a lot of our migrant students, 43%, are English language learners, a majority of speaking Spanish. We have a significant population of preschool-age migrant students, about 2,700. And our migrant students' four-year graduation rate is about 64%, but with another year under their belt, 70% graduation rate. And so what this is showing us is how important that extra time is to our migrant students to get what they need to graduate. In our program under ESSA, we have 5 program purposes, but we've consolidated into 4. So we want to make sure we are having high-quality educational programs for those who are receiving a sub-grant, that we are not penalizing migrant students who come in and out of our state or move around district boundaries in relation to their curriculum, graduation requirements, and state standards. That we're allowing for opportunities to meet that same challenging academic standard and graduation requirements, and that we're helping to overcome the barriers to educational access and benefit from state and local systemic reform. So with every program, there are reporting requirements. So the Office of Migrant Education is looking at the percentage of migrant students who are scoring at or above proficient in the reading language arts, as well as mathematics for grades K 3 through 8. Also, the percentage of migrant students in grades 7 through 12 who are graduating or being promoted to the next grade level, and the percentage of migrant students in the 11th grade who have received full credit for Algebra 1. So these are areas that we will be continuing to further explore in terms of how we gather that data and report it to the Office of Migrant Education, but these are indeed areas that they are wanting the states to focus on. When it comes to migrant students, a national study was conducted about the barriers to academic success, and they identified 7 areas which are of major concern when it comes to migrant students. And if you look at this list of the educational continuity, instructional time, school engagement, English language development, educational support in the home, health, and access to services, you might see that these 7 areas may pertain to other students, not just migrant students. But what is very critical for the migrant education program is a lot of times, especially if they're highly mobile migrant families, they will come with all 7 of these barriers. And this is where we want to make sure we can help engage the family, connect them with resources, look at how we are providing that extra time for instruction, and where we are connecting them for English language development. So these areas, yes, they may be for more than migrant students, but unfortunately, a lot of times, these 7 components are really more than often for more than just, migrant students more than often have more than one of these areas. And when you're looking at your schools and your services, sometimes you may have other barriers that you're looking at trying to resolve. We know that these are the national areas, the 7 areas of concern, but there may be some other areas that you're attempting to address as you serve your migrant students, and I'd like for you to try to keep those in mind. We also have a model of continuous improvement cycles that we are following under the guidance of the Migrant Education Program, Office of Migrant Education. And so we are in the process of developing a state service delivery plan. But in order to get to that level, we started with a current state service delivery plan that we're under, and that was implemented in 2012, 2013, and concludes this year. And so as part of our ongoing process, we conducted a comprehensive needs assessment the prior year, 15-16, and from that we analyzed the needs, the results of those of that analysis, and we are moving towards developing a state service delivery plan that is scheduled to be implemented next year, 2017-2018. And so because of all of these things moving all together, we aligned the work that we were already doing with the results of the ESSA. And so we did not have a separate work group that you may have heard about were developed for the other components of the consolidated application. But we did use this work group that we've been working with to then align our efforts with the consolidated state plan. So talk a little bit more about that in a second. But what I wanted to also point out was, as part of our development, we will move into implementation, so there will be some changes coming up in our grant application process, and as I noted, a new state service delivery plan. And then that will be annually evaluated. So every year that we are under this new plan, we will be evaluating and refining, adjusting as needed. But this plan, this new state plan, will take us from 2017, 2018 to 2019, 2020. The new plan, the State Service Delivery Plan, we've identified 4 focus areas. So we will, of course, be working on English language arts, mathematics, school readiness, and that will even take us into preschool and high school graduation. So those will be the 4 focus areas of the new Service Delivery Plan. And right now what we're doing is we're working with our work group, crafting those goal statements and developing what they call measurable performance outcomes, and then identifying the data that we'll need to collect for these MPOs and methods to evaluate those MPOs, and then determining if any changes to the allocation factors for LEA subgrants. So this is the work that is currently happening for the development of the new State Service Delivery Plan. Under the consolidated application, we are pages 175 and 178 in the application document. We are still required to do identification and recruitment of eligible migratory children on a statewide basis. So we have all of those components in place, and we'll continue to work those pieces through. We have a new way we have to include in the assessment of our migrant student needs those preschool students and children who have dropped out. So that is a new component under ESSA that we'll be incorporating. And then we, of course, will still need to make available services through the local, state, and federal education programs, and then promote the interstate coordination of our services with other states, because we know migrant students come from other states, and so we want to make sure that we're reducing those barriers to helping them continue with their education. We also required under ESSA, and which aligned nicely with our State Service Delivery Plan, those measurable program objectives. We are required to do consultation with migrant parents, and it is our Parent Advisory Council that we want to make sure every subgrant has in place, as well as at the state level we have a State Advisory Committee. And so we're always looking for new members for our advisory committee. Families move, families leave, and so we tend to have 1 or 2 spots available for parent representative. So if you are listening and interested and available to help me find a parent or 2, I would be happy to hear from you. And we also have an update on our priority for service definition, and I'm going to get into that in just a little bit deeper. And then, of course, we have to communicate all of this out to our subgrantees, local education agencies. So here's the update for the priority for service definition. I'm just going to read it. In providing services with funds received under this part, each recipient of such funds shall give priority to migrant children who have made qualifying move within the previous 1-year period and who are most at risk of or failing to meet the challenging state academic standards or have dropped out of school. So the 2 new components are previously 1-year period. Before, it was an interrupted school year, and so what we were missing were students sometimes would leave Washington State, go to another state like California, for example, during the school year. They would go to California. They would be identified as priority in California because they had that interrupted school year. They would come back to Washington State in early summer to begin the harvest, Washington State would create a new certificate of eligibility for their return back to Washington State and their qualifying work in agriculture or fishing. But then, because it was during the summer period, we would not be able to identify them as a priority because it fell outside the interrupted school year. This one now allows us to identify them still as a priority for service because they did leave during the school year, but also came back in the summer, and now they just have that move during that year. We also now have the whole component of dropped out of school. So this is an effort to look at migrant students who may have been just so close to graduating, and for whatever reason they left school without receiving their high school diploma. We want to take a look at those students and look to see, are they still retrievable? Or can we look at some alternative education options for these students? So these are now part of our requirements under ESSA that we need to continue to look deeper into and see how we can address them as part of our plan for Washington State. We have not yet received our non-regulatory guidance for Title I Part C migrant education, so we are still waiting for that additional guidance to come with ESSA. But in the meantime, we do know that we have allowable services that we can focus on, and so we want to make sure that we are always supplemental to the other services that migrant students are eligible and entitled to receive from other local, state, and federal programs. We can serve both academic and non-academic, so any support services that migrant students may need, we can definitely look to see how we can make that work. We want to work in coordination and collaboration with other state and federal programs. That is a requirement, and we need to make sure we're not replacing or supplanting services for which migrant students should be able to access through other programs. So this is in coordination and collaboration that we want to make sure we're helping to support the needs of our migrant students. This could even include family engagement or family literacy efforts. We could look at home-based programs, before school, after school, Saturday, the winter break, spring break, and summer. So we want to make sure that we are looking at all options that our migrant students would be able to access and help them to begin to meet standard. One of the components that Washington State is being recognized nationally for is our collaboration with Islandwood and Fort Worden for our Voices from the Field Science and Arts. This is targeted to our middle school migrant students, and it is our arts program. We're in the second year of that, so we're still learning a lot. Our science program, I believe we're almost into our 7th year, and that has been a really incredible experience. We have that targeted to the higher districts who have a more significant migrant population, and unfortunately, because of our size, we can only send up to 10 school districts a year to this event, but we really do try to branch out and make sure our migrant students can participate, and we work in partnership with the local school districts for this event because they end up sending the chaperones and the transportation to support those students. The other events are the Dare to Dream Exploring Your Future and Academic Academies, and those are done with the University of Washington, Washington State University, Eastern Washington University, and Central Washington University with their college assistance migrant programs, the CAMP programs that they have on their campus. And we're into our 6th summer for those events, and I want to show you a few photos of those students. They really are engaged in their learning in a very different environment, especially when they're on a university campus. A lot of times, because they're of their migratory lifestyle, they may not be the ones that get picked to go during the school year because of attendance or grade issues. And so when we work with these universities to have them in the summer, so it does not conflict with the regular school year. Now, I understand that this year we are going to be needing to work with our local school districts a lot because of the snow days in eastern Washington, and that there may be a little bit of an overlap in making up those snow days and when these events will happen. But we want to work with those school districts to see how we can get our migrant students to these events, because they really do grow. It's an intense week-long Sunday through Saturday. They come back Saturday night. The universities work to pick up and drop off the migrant students, so there is no very little transportation support from the school district. Sometimes the pickup or drop-off spot is not in the direct vicinity of where the school district is, but we work with the school district and the university to try and make those matches as good as possible. We're really, really excited about summer 2017, and we hope if a migrant student gets invited that they will really consider it participating. Wanted to share a little bit about health services in Washington State. We wanted to welcome Armando Isaias Garcia. He is our new health supervisor at OSPI. This is a program that has traditionally been held at North Central ESC, and they have been the lead contractor for this health services component for Washington State Migrant Education Program for a long time. But we're making a transition, and we're moving it to the state level so that we can strengthen those coordinated efforts with other state, county, and local resources. We want to also strengthen the collaboration with OSPI's Student Support Office, and also look at our partnerships with Nursing Corps and even the CTE programs at OSPI and in the school districts. So there's a lot that we're changing, but there'll be also that same consistent support for the basic needs of our migrant students and that health support in terms of the physicals and dentals that we've always provided. So more to come on this component. We want to welcome Armando to Washington State and to this project. Here is our contact information. If you have any questions regarding this presentation or the content of the presentation, or if you want to just get a hold of us for other questions regarding the Title I Part C Migrant Education Program, you have our phone numbers, our email, and we would be happy to talk to you about anything regarding the Migrant Education Program at Washington State. I'm going to take a moment and look and see if there's any questions. Well, it doesn't look like there's any questions from the crowd, so I'm going to go ahead and say thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and that you will contact us if you have any questions regarding migrant education and ESSA. Thank you, and have a great day.